why soccer is the world's most popular sport. Right now, somewhere on Earth, a ball is rolling across a patch of grass. At this very moment, millions of matches are unfolding. From dusty streets in Africa to beaches in Brazil. From neighborhood parks in England to mountain villages in South America. Different languages, different cultures, different lives, yet they're all playing the same game, and it's about to make 3.5 billion people feel something. Not million, billion. That's nearly half the planet. Few human activities command this kind of simultaneous worldwide emotional attention. No film franchise, no music concert, no election. Almost nothing created by human civilization can make billions of people laugh, cry, celebrate, and grieve at nearly the same time. Except one. A sport where you're mostly not allowed to use your hands. So here's the real question. Why this game? Why not basketball with its NBA marketing machine? Why not cricket played by more than 1 billion people? Why not the ancient, brutal spectacles humans have loved for thousands of years? The answer isn't really about soccer. It's about us. It's about psychological machinery that has been evolving for hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of years. And a sport that happens to fit it almost perfectly. The war we're allowed to have. Let's go back. Not to 1863 when the first football rules were written in a London pub, much further back. Across the long evolution of the human lineage, our ancestors survived not because they were the biggest or the fastest, but because they belonged to groups that cooperated better and competed more effectively than neighboring groups. Evolutionary psychologists have a theory for this, and it's blunt. Humans evolved as a coalitional species. Survival didn't just depend on individual strength. It depended on which group you belonged to and whether that group could out-cooperate and out-compete the group next door. Researchers studying what is known as the male warrior hypothesis argue that this history shaped deep psychological machinery. An instinct to divide the world into us and them, and to care deeply about whether us wins. Many evolutionary psychologists argue that organized sport functions as a safe proxy for intergroup competition, a ritualized contest where ancient coalitional instincts can play out without the catastrophic costs of actual warfare. That's an extraordinary psychological invention. It allows a brain built for tribal competition to experience victory, defeat, loyalty, sacrifice, and collective identity inside a stadium instead of on a battlefield. And soccer runs this ancient program exceptionally well. 2 clearly defined tribes, a contested territory, an invasion of enemy ground, a single decisive strike that can transform everything in an instant. It is coalitional competition distilled to its purest form. The games are older than you think. Humans didn't invent organized sport as a substitute for tribal conflict. We perfected it. The ancient Olympic Games began around 776 BC in Olympia, Greece. They weren't just athletic competitions. They were religious festivals, political gatherings, displays of civic pride. City-states like Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes sent their finest athletes to compete. Not simply for personal glory, but for the honor of the entire polis. A victory belonged to everyone. Winning athletes returned home to cheering crowds, lifelong privileges, public statues, and songs celebrating their achievements. Because in the ancient world, their triumph proved something larger. It proved that your city was stronger, your people were superior. Centuries later, the Romans expanded the idea on a scale the world had never seen. The Colosseum could hold roughly 50,000 spectators. Men and women from every corner of the empire gathered to witness the same contest, reacting together as if they were one enormous tribe. The Roman poet Juvenal famously criticized this obsession with what he called bread and circuses. His point wasn't simply that Romans enjoyed entertainment. It was that spectacular public competitions could occupy millions of people. channel powerful emotions, and reinforce the social order of one of history's largest empires. Sound familiar? Swap chariots for cleats, gladiators for wingers, marble arenas for modern stadiums. The architecture barely changes, a massive bowl filled with strangers, one shared object of attention, two opposing sides, one emotional outcome. For a few hours, thousands of individual lives merge into a single heartbeat. We didn't outgrow this instinct. We simply found a better game. Soccer didn't create our tribal psychology. It inherited it. And then it spread it farther than any civilization ever could. The science of us. In the 1970s, a social psychologist named Henri Tujfel ran a series of experiments that changed how we understand human behavior. He took complete strangers and divided them into groups using something almost comically trivial, such as a preference for one abstract painter over another. There was no history, no rivalry, no meaningful difference between the groups, and yet something remarkable happened. People immediately began favoring members of their own group. They allocated more rewards to people on their side. They judged their own group more positively. And they became surprisingly loyal to people they had met only minutes earlier. This became known as social identity theory, and its central idea is both simple and profound. Part of your identity comes directly from the groups you belong to. Your brain doesn't need a compelling reason to create an us. It only needs a label. Now imagine what happens when that label isn't assigned in a laboratory. Imagine it's the club your grandfather supported, the neighborhood where you grew up, the jersey you've worn since childhood, the national anthem you've sung before every World Cup. Psychologists describe this process through three powerful mechanisms. We categorize ourselves. We identify with our group, then we compare our group against everyone else. Soccer activates all three with extraordinary force. It's why fans instinctively say, "We won," not "they won." Researchers have measured this phenomenon for decades. After a victory, supporters are significantly more likely to wear their team's colors, speak proudly about the club, and describe success using the word "we." Psychologists call this basking in reflected glory. After a defeat, many of those same supporters subtly distance themselves, and instead of saying, "We lost," they say, "They played terribly today." Psychologists call this cutting off reflected failure. Nothing about the fan's own life has changed. They never stepped onto the field. They never touched the ball. Yet their brain processes victory and defeat as though part of their own identity had risen or fallen with the final whistle. Soccer doesn't create tribal identity. It gives one of humanity's oldest psychological instincts a jersey, a stadium, and 90 minutes to come alive. One game, every tribe. Imagine a young man growing up in a crowded neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro. There isn't a polished stadium nearby, and his family could never afford expensive equipment, but none of that matters. Someone brings an old, worn-out ball. Two backpacks become goalposts. Within minutes, strangers become teammates, teammates become rivals, and an ordinary street becomes the center of the world. Now imagine another young man thousands of miles away, in Lagos, Buenos Aires, Cairo, Mumbai, or a small village in Europe. He speaks a different language, he has different traditions, different ambitions, and a completely different life. Yet the moment the ball starts rolling, he understands exactly the same rules, the same emotions, and the same feeling of belonging. Neither of them knows the other exists, yet both have discovered the same tribe. That is where soccer separates itself from almost every other sport on earth. It operates at every layer of human identity simultaneously. There's the neighborhood rivalry. Boca Juniors versus River Plate in Buenos Aires. A match so emotionally charged, it's known simply as El Superclásico. Then there are regional and historical rivalries. Barcelona versus Real Madrid. a fixture that has long been intertwined with Catalan identity and Spanish central authority, making every match feel like far more than a contest over 3 points. And finally, there is the largest tribe of all, the nation. Every 4 years, the FIFA World Cup reaches nearly 5 billion people through television, streaming, and digital engagement. For 90 minutes, millions of strangers stop being individuals. They become one country. Flags appear on faces, national anthems echo through stadiums, entire cities empty. Families gather around televisions. Complete strangers hug each other after a goal. Political scientists have long observed that international sport is one of the few places where national identity isn't merely accepted. It's celebrated. Very few events allow an entire nation to experience joy, heartbreak, hope, and despair together in real time. But soccer has one more advantage. It asks almost nothing in return. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't need specialized facilities. You don't need exceptional height or rare physical attributes. And you need a ball, or something that can become one. 2 markers for goalposts, and enough open space to dream. That's why an estimated 250 million registered players and countless millions more playing informally have made soccer the world's game. It isn't just the world's biggest spectacle. It's the world's most accessible one. Why soccer wins the psychology game. So let's connect the pieces. Evolutionary psychology suggests that our brains evolved to treat group competition as deeply significant. Organized sport became a safe outlet for ancient coalitional instincts that once determined survival. Ancient Greece and Rome demonstrated that when those instincts became public spectacle, they could unite thousands of strangers around a shared emotional experience. Social identity theory shows that people naturally absorb groups into their own identity. That loyalty becomes even stronger when those groups carry real history, shared symbols, and generations of tradition. Soccer brings all of these forces together. It can be played almost anywhere on Earth. It builds loyalty from neighborhoods to nations. And because goals are rare, every decisive moment carries enormous emotional weight. Modern psychology offers one more clue. Humans are especially sensitive to uncertain rewards. The longer the uncertainty lasts, the more powerful the emotional release becomes when the outcome finally arrives. A soccer match can build tension for nearly 90 minutes before a single kick changes everything. The wait is part of the experience. Every goal feels earned. Every celebration feels unforgettable. That is why soccer became the world's most popular sport. Not because it has the best marketing. Not because it has the richest leagues. Because it aligns remarkably well with how the human mind evolved. The next time you watch 22 people chasing a ball, remember that you're seeing something far older than the game itself. You're watching millions of years of human evolution, ancient civilizations, and modern psychology converge on 90 minutes of competition. It was never just about the ball. It was always about us. If this story changed the way you see the world's most popular sport, you're in the right place. Here we explore the hidden forces that shape human behavior through history, evolutionary psychology, philosophy, and science. If that sounds interesting, subscribe and join us for the next episode.